Okay, welcome everybody to the council public meeting for Tuesday, February the 11th at 7 o'clock. For those of you in the audience, thank you very much for braving the cold and coming out. And I know we have some people joining us online, including Regional Local Councillor DePaulo and Councillor Hsu. So I will call this meeting to order, but before I do, I'll just read the public hearing statement. If a person or public body or specified person does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make a written submission to the City of Richmond Hill in respect of a proposed official plan amendment or zoning bylaw amendment, the person, public body, or specified person is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So, having said that exciting statement, I will call for a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Tree, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Disclosures of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none. Okay, scheduled business. So we have 4 items tonight that we'll deal with, starting with the first one. And as I mentioned earlier to those in the audience, the way that this will kind of work tonight is we will be dealing with all 4 items separately, and we'll call for the staff to kind of give an outline of the application, and then the applicant will have an opportunity to do the same. And then after that, we'll be opening it up to folks in the audience that would like to talk to us about that. And then after that, we'll bring it back to council for our opinion. And we do have other, we do have some letters and emails and so on that were sent to us as well that are included in the package. So the first item that we're dealing with tonight is for a zoning official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 500 Elgin Mills Road East and 93 Edward, which is Laramont School. So the person from staff that's going to be talking to us is Samantha Young. So Samantha, come on up and let us know all the exciting details.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of public. The first item that we have tonight involves the submission of a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application for the lands municipally known as 500 Elgin Mills Road East and 93 Edwards Avenue. So the subject lands are located on the north side of Elgin Mills Road East and west of, and on the north side of Elgin Mills Road East and on the east side of Edwards Avenue. The lands are located within the New Kirk Business Park. The subject lands have a combined frontage of approximately 180 meters along Edward Avenue and have a total lot area of 2.7 hectares. The subject lands are comprised of 2 parcels, where the southern parcel, 500 Elgin Mills Road East, supports an existing 2-story private institutional building known as Laramont School, an associated field, and a surface parking lot. The northern parcel, 93 Edward Avenue, supports an existing 1-story building that is used as a temporary school facility, as well as a accessory structure for storage and a parking area. The surrounding land uses include industrial uses to the north, low-density residential uses to the east and south of the lands, and there's also an existing commercial plaza and other industrial uses further to the east. Both properties are currently designated employment area in accordance with the city's official plan. The lands are lands designated employment area are typically intended to accommodate a range of high-performance industrial and office uses that are inclusive of manufacturing, processing, servicing, warehousing, and bulk storage of goods and wholesaling. With respect to zoning, 93 Edward Avenue is zoned high-performance industrial, which is M1 zone. And Elgin Mills Road is zoned high performance industrial, M1 zone, high performance industrial commercial zone, so MC1 zone, and a third one, local commercial LC zone under zoning bylaw 184-87 as amended. In general, the M1 and MC1 zones permit industrial uses, and the LC zone permits small scale commercial uses such as convenience retail stores. Okay, so given the current official plan designation and zoning on the subject lands, the applicant has submitted an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application for their proposed development. The applicant is requesting approval of their official plan amendment to amend the policies of the employment area designation to permit a private school use and recreational use in addition to the existing list of permitted uses. This would allow for the proposed recreational building that is located, that is associated with the private school on the south side on 500 Elgin Mills Road. And also permitting the private school on 500 Elgin Mills Road East in their official plan. A related zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted by the applicant to permit site-specific amendments to the M1 zone applicable to 93 Edward Avenue relating to the minimum front yard setback, minimum side yard setback, and parking requirements in support of the proposed recreational building and outdoor field. So the proposed recreational building is to be 1 story in height with a gross floor area of approximately 1,000 square meters. And it is to include an indoor gymnasium, weight room, locker rooms, and staff support rooms. The associated outdoor sports field will also be there on 93 Edward, which has an artificial turf field. With respect to 500 Elgin Mills Road East, the applicant has requested these lands to be rezoned to a single zoning category, which is MC1 zone, with a site-specific provision to allow for the private school use. Okay, the applicant has provided this proposed building elevation of the multi-purpose recreational building to be located on 93 Edward Avenue. Okay. And then there's the other elevations. So planning staff has circulated the subject applications to internal departments and external agencies for review and comment. At this planning stage, the purpose is to provide council and the public an overview of the development proposal and has been structured for information purposes only, with the recommendation that all comments be received and referred back to staff for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And for the applicant, I believe we have Rosemary Humphreys from Humphrey Planning Group. And I think I just saw, there she is. Hello, Rosemary. You've got 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you. Hopefully I won't take all that time. I thought the presentation by the staff member was fairly good. I just want to probably outline a few additional items for council and whoever might be there from the public. And I don't think we need to see this slide. Everybody knows where this site is located. The use has been there since the mid 2000s, and the school has been in operation and for over 65 years as an entity. Can you go to the next slide, please? I don't think I'll talk too much about this, but I just wanted to embellish here where the actual changes to the site are occurring, and that's outlined in blue on the air photo there. And you can see the existing school that's operational today, where it's labeled 500 Elgin Mills Road. Next slide, please. As the planner had pointed out, this is the area where we're proposing to change the use. So we're proposing to take a former parking lot area and put an outdoor sports field there, as well as some additional building area that would replace the buildings that are there today in a different configuration, providing some indoor recreational uses with a sports orientation. Obviously, I just wanted to reiterate here that no new classroom space or students are going to be generated from this application. And the interconnection between where the existing school is and this recreational facility component, the changes between the two sites actually will result in pathways, walkways as interconnections and some adjustments to the landscaped area to accommodate those things. Next slide, please. As the planner had indicated, the site is designated for employment uses. What she didn't tell you is that when the initial school use actually was approved for this property, institutional uses in private schools were in fact permitted. So over the course of time, as the municipalities have changed the definitions and proposed uses, the existing school site is no longer a permitted use in the official plan, but it's considered to be legal given the original application that was approved for the site. So we're seeking to make corrections to reinstate and add the existing use so it can formally be recognized. Next slide, please. In terms of the zoning, as she had indicated, we have a split zoning on the property. We're proposing through this application to clean the zoning up to make it a little easier to understand, given that the properties are all within one entity now, or will be with one entity, and the proposed recreational use will be an extension or an expansion of the existing school use on that property. So we'll be working with staff to come up with a bylaw that's appropriate to implement the proposed use while recognizing the existing uses on the site. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit more detail in terms of what the proposed use is and the programming of the proposed building, showing you a little bit more detail as it relates to that she'd already explained. So there's a gymnasium, a weight room, change room, courtyard area, that sort of thing, and how it will be an accessory and complementary to the existing school to the south on the site. Next slide, please. That's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we don't have anybody signed up to speak to this specifically. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this particular application? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring this back to council then for their comments. And Councillor Thompson, this is in your ward, so you can start us off.
Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, and also Rosemary for presentations. I don't think that was me.
That was not a comment, so strike that from the record. Go ahead, Councillor.
We are on a new audio video system here, so maybe it was still trying to gauge my voice here or something. I have no idea. But any rate, I just wanted to, if possible, if we can bring back up the presentation from staff, slide 2. It'll make it a little bit easier for me to speak to this. And that is that, and I have to appreciate that staff have certainly helped me to understand what we call a conundrum with this particular application. And we have the 2 parcels of land, of which Rosemary had already mentioned that the school was established prior to the current employment designations. And that's the southern parcel of land that you see here. And so, if you look at it from a grandfather clause, they're in there, they're operating, and that all happened long before the current designations. It's the 93 Edward parcel of land that becomes a little bit confusing here because it's still registered as employment lands or zoned as employment lands. And what I'm trying to sort out here, because I've seen this property there for quite some time. I used to work for stock transportation. We used to actually rent this space from them on this property. You know, so it was something where we always knew it belonged to the former Toronto Montessori School, and that they had plans to use it at some time. And so the use that they're asking for right now certainly seemed exactly what we figured was appropriate. This would be appropriate expansion. What the difficulty now is that if we're looking at the staff report, it talks about how the York Region official plan, and this is on page 7 of the report at the very bottom, it's saying that policy, and let me just get this right here. Policy states that if an expansion is granted, it shall have regard for existing adjacent employment areas. And that, so even if this had been established, or this property for the use, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I'm trying to sort out, I guess, when this particular property came into the possession of the school, because I think this is key. And I'm not sure if anybody has that answer. Would staff or the applicant have that answer?
Over to you, staff.
Staff does not have that information available, but we can get back to council in that regard. I don't know if Rosemary has that information available to her.
Okay, and the reason why I asked that, thank you through the chair, the reason why I asked that is that I would think that this should be a slam dunk. If they bought this property also before the changes were actually made, even though they didn't get a zoning amendment back at that time, I think there could be a substantial argument here that we should definitely approve what they're asking for. The other question that I have has to do with the rezoning of 500 Elgin Mills, the southern parcel here. Because if I've read the report correctly, it sounds like there really isn't any need to rezone that property, that development can certainly occur under the current designation as amended. Could I get confirmation of that?
Through the chair, that's correct. It's an exercise of cleaning up the 3 different zone categories on the 500 Elgin Mills parcel.
I see. So, sorry, so clarification, you're just trying to, I'm not sure, would it mean that that's a good thing or a bad thing to change the designation?
Through the chair, to Councillor Thompson, the applicant appears to be just cleaning up the zoning. They currently have 3 different zone categories. So when they came in for the application to the north, they looked at their land holding as a whole and decided to clean up the zoning for the southern parcel, which is the MC1 zone that permits the institutional use currently existent there.
Okay, but the current designation as amended basically says it really wasn't necessary, if I'm...
That is correct.
Okay, so it sounds like a costly endeavor for them, but okay. I think that's really all I wanted to say. I'll just, if you'll let me just wrap up real quickly here. I don't want to hold back any business or the institution from being able to expand, regardless of what the regional official plan says, because they've been long time established. And, you know, like I said, I can't see, well, if you look at it right now, that 93 property is not doing anything else. I mean, it's not like it's going to have a viable employment operation on there as long as they're owning it. So to me, it makes sense that they should be able to use it in the manner that they're using it as an institution. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you'll move the motion to refer all comments
definitely.
back to staff?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Regional Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, staff, and also from the applicant's agent. the local council who just spoke using a slam dunk, I would have thought this is no-brainer. The northern side is just ancillary to the use of the school, which is institution, but it's for different uses, recreational. I find it interesting, for example, on page 8, it's a continuation of legally existing and legally permitted uses of land, buildings, and structures. So not one legal, but two legal, so to speak. So everything seems to be in order. There was already, I gather, seeking clarification from Councillor Thompson. I was just wondering, through you, Mr. Chair, one of the thing is, could this not to be seen as, I think I used that term already, ancillary to the institutional use just south of the site, whether in fact it could replace this with or substitute it with, this is actually a new zoning amendment for changing the use from institution to recreation, recognizing there are other things I would turn my question to later on, through you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair to Councillor Chen. So to be clear, the lands to the north of the existing site are not zoned for the institutional uses, nor have they ever been established for the institutional uses. There was a temporary use bylaw that did allow for an institutional use that does not have the same measure of conformity that allowed for that 93 Edward Avenue property to be used for institutional purposes. It expired in 2023. So the nature of the applications in front of us today is to establish a use without the benefit of an MCR, which was part of the provincial changes, which the applicants can now do. 93 Edward has not had institutional uses legally existent on the property, whereas 500 Elgin Mills has, and has for some time. Was a pre-existing site-specific official plan policy that predated the 2010 ROP that allowed for that use. That exception has carried forward to allow for the institutional use on 500 Elgin Mills to exist and continue to exist in zoning. The issue that we presented with this application is that the 93 Edward property does not have the benefit of those permissions in terms of the OP, as well as in terms of the zoning. And with recent legislative changes to the provincial planning statement, as well as the Planning Act, institutional uses are prohibited in employment areas. So to be clear, it's the existing 500 Elgin Mills institution is permitted. It continues to operate there. There's no taking away of that permission. The question is only with respect to 93 Edward Avenue, which staff are trying to ensure as part of the review of this application that in the event that we are recommending approval of that use, that it's in conformity with both the provincial direction with respect to employment lands, which there's a presentation later this evening on, and whether or not it makes sense for the city's OP policies as well.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for the response. So it has been mentioned previously, and I think in the staff report, it mentioned not once, but 2 times about the potential, or concern about destabilizing the employment land use. And Madam Director just also mentioned because of the changes in the recent provincial statement, and also I hear the word prohibit. So through you, Mr. Chair, I support, if we were to ask for making a decision, I will support that application, but we are not at that stage tonight. Having said that, would that eventually, let's say if it's approved, I'm trying to think about how to interpret that word, destabilize. Would we set up a precedent where in the future some applicant might come in to say, aha, on one hand, provincial statement thou shalt prohibit it to do anything else on employment land. On the other hand, Cedar Richmond Hill, you approve this one. Of course, we are not there yet, but I just want to get some sense of the way of interpret it, or whether in fact it could be, assuming it might bring back to council at a later stage, and if it's approved, it could be conditions could be imposed on the approval whereby this is quote unquote site-specific one-off situation. Through the chair.
So when staff raised the concern about destabilizing the employment area, it's the concern that we are.
It's a concern, yeah.
So it's a it's a concern that we would be essentially removing employment lands, because that's the way to do this, is by allowing for a institutional use on these lands where we actually are converting it to non-employment lands. So as you continue to do that in an employment area, and we have only 3 key employment areas in the city, we want to preserve them to the greatest extent possible. And as you start chipping away at conversions of employment lands to non-employment uses, that's the effect. It also has the effect of, as you increase the non-employment land uses to more sensitive land uses, other uses in the employment areas are then can potentially be impacted on their ability to expand, because now they have more non-employment uses in close proximity. So those are the general concerns that we as staff have to review and evaluate to ensure that if we are recommending support, that it doesn't have these negative impacts for the city and for this employment area.
Thank you. I got it, but maybe it's true. I'm hoping because of the comments, so maybe it's no answer at this point in time. Oh, sorry. Thank you. We're still learning the system here. But at some point in time, that's what my comment would be, that if the recommendation from staff eventually would be for approval, I would have expect there's some kind of language or confining condition in approval so that this, yes, destabilize, as it was explained, but it would not be potentially argued by another applicant. Look, you set a precedent. So that's where I'm coming from. Having said that, Mr. Chair, as I said, I do support the motion, have all the comments, and I just make my comment. Maybe it's no answer at this point in time, but thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll just keep my comments very brief. I appreciate the work that staff's doing, and I appreciate the work that the applicant is doing. I think it's pretty clear that, this particular institution is an important one in Richmond Hill, and they have a good application before us, and I certainly understand why this would be to the benefit of the school. I'm probably the one that said this most often, that I'm very concerned about, losing employment land, because, we don't have a lot left of it, and we can't be giving it away for non-employment uses. But I guess, the only comment I would make is there are going to have to be exceptions every now and again to that policy. And I think, in fairness, if I'm not mistaken, I think they probably bought this land while that use was permitted. And I mean, we did approve the school being there at some point in the past. But I think, in terms of destabilizing, this is probably the best piece of land if we were to give that permission, because it's actually not smack dab in the middle of the employment land. That would be a real problem. It's right on the very edge of it, with Elgin Mills and a residential area on the one side, and then another road on the west side. So I think staff needs to go through the due diligence. The staff has outlined a number of important procedural things, that some of which are within our control and some of which rest with the provincial policy statement. And we need to do this right, and that's in everybody's best interest, I think. So I think we need to, go ahead with the work that we're doing, let the process play out itself, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder to refer all comments heard tonight here back to staff on this application so staff can continue to do their work. So all those in favor? Opposed, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, so the next application is number 4.2, and it is an application for a zoning bylaw amendment application for 35, 37, 39, 41 Edgar Avenue and 20 Scott Drive. And to kick us off, we've got Samantha Young doing an encore performance. She did a really good job in the first one, so she's back. And so we'll have that, and then we'll go to the applicant after that. So Samantha, over to you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back. Good evening again to Mr. Mayor, members of council, and the public again. So this item here involves the submission of a proposed zoning bylaw amendment application for the lands municipally known as 35, 37, 39, and 41 Edgar Avenue and 20 Scott Drive. Okay. The subject lands are located on the south side of Edgar Avenue and north of Scott Drive and west of Clinton Drive. The lands combined have frontage of approximately 109 meters along Edgar Avenue and 30 meters along Scott Drive, and have a total area of approximately 0.9 hectares. The lands currently support 5 single detached dwellings, which are proposed to be retained. The surrounding land uses include low-density residential, primarily consisting of single detached dwellings surrounding north, south, east, and west of the properties. The subject lands are currently designated neighborhood in accordance to the city's official plan. This designation is intended for low and medium density residential uses, commercial uses, and among other uses too. With respect to low density residential uses, the official plan permits single detached dwellings. The subject lands are also located within a designated priority infill area in accordance to our official plan. However, this area does not have an applicable infill study approved by council. As such, the proposed development will be assessed based on policies of the neighborhood designation. With respect to zoning, the subject lands are dual zoned, with the north portion of the lands zoned second density residential R2 zone, and the southern portion zoned third density residential R3 zone under zoning bylaw 2523 as amended, which permits single detached dwellings and other uses too. The applicant is seeking approval to rezone the subject lands to a single zone, the third density residential R3 zone under bylaw 2523 as amended, and to permit site-specific development standards relating to minimum lot frontage, minimum lot area, maximum lot frontage, minimum front yard, and minimum side yard, minimum rear yard, and minimum gross ground floor area. And lastly, maximum building height standards in order to facilitate the construction of 9 single detached dwellings. The proposal includes the extension of Clinton Drive, and then the 9 proposed residential lots will be fronting on that extended public road. Okay, so the applicant has provided these proposed building elevations for 2-story single detached dwellings. And then lastly, planning staff have circulated the subject applications to internal departments and external agencies for review and comment. The purpose of the report, the purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide council and the public an overview of the development proposal and has been structured for information purposes only, with the recommendation that all comments be received and referred back to staff for consideration. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. So for the applicant, we've got Daphne Gokkin. How do you do the C in that?
I know, it's not well translated. We go with Daphne Goxon.
Goxon?
Yes.
I'm going to know that the next time.
All right.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Can I control my own presentation or will the staff be controlling it?
I think we'll control it.
I can do it?
Oh, you
Okay.
can? Okay.
All right, amazing. So good evening. My name is Daphne Goxon. I'm from Innovative Planning Solutions. As was mentioned, I'm here tonight representing the property owners at 20 Scott Drive and then 35, 37, 39, and 41 Edgar Avenue. The application is a zoning bylaw amendment and also a draft plan of subdivision. Did that work? Oh, there it goes. So I know the staff already covered sort of the area. I just wanted to highlight on this slide that the neighborhood has a variety of different lot sizes currently, that the lot fabric is not uniform. And also just highlight the Clinton Drive extension that you can see, which is partially built out, and that there was a subdivision approved to the east that's currently under construction as well. And as was mentioned, this is a priority infill area. I'm going to just skip the official plan. I think it was already covered by staff and just get into the zoning bylaw. So this map shows the current zoning, with the subject properties highlighted in blue. And then to the right, you can see the R3 zone with site-specific permissions, which was for the subdivision to the east, which was already approved by City Council. So as was mentioned again, we are requesting for the entire property to be moved into the R3 zone with site-specific provisions. And the majority of the site-specific provisions were designed to exactly match what was approved for the subdivision to the east. There's only 2 provisions which are different, and those provisions are the minimum lot frontage and the minimum lot size. I'll get into a little bit more about why we requested those on the next slide. So here's the draft plan of subdivision. So there's 9 new lots that are proposed plus the extension of Clinton Drive. The 5 existing homes on Edgar and Scott will be retained. So the 2 lots that are the ones that are the reason for the differences in the zoning are lots 4 and 5. And you can see that those lots have a narrower lot width and as a result have a narrow lot size. And from this plan, you can see that the reason for that is because the ghost is back, is because the lot widths match the existing lot widths on 35 and 37 Edgar. So currently, the design is to have those lots behind 35 and 7 to match the lot width of those 2 lots, which is just under 11 meters. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there is precedent in this area for these sort of irregular lot sizes. In fact, 18 and 20 Edgar, which are in the same block, are also under 11 meters in width currently. So it's not something new or out of the ordinary. And I also want to note that this request does not create additional lots. If the lots on the north side of Clinton were all even inside, it would still be 5 lots. They would just all be 13 meters in width, which would match what was approved for the subdivision to the east. Whereas instead, we have 2 15-meter lots, 1 13-meter, and 2 11-meter lots approximately. I also want to note that the smaller lot sizes do not mean small homes. As was shown in this architectural sort of conceptual plans from the architect, those homes would be around 250 square meters, which is almost 2,700 square feet. So these are nice family-sized homes still on these lots, fitting in with the surrounding neighborhood. I know there was a letter from one of the neighbors on Edgar Avenue. I just wanted to briefly just clarify a few things in response to that letter. The project, as shown here, proposes 5 lots on the north side of Clinton, and then the remaining 4 lots are on the south side. As mentioned, the 2 of the 5 lots will be narrow compared to other lots on Clinton, but will match the existing lot fabric on Edgar. And the other lots are all, at the very least, in compliance with the subdivision to the east lot widths. And that the remaining 4 lots will be on the south side and not on the same side of the street. So the letter mentioned we're proposing 9 new lots behind 3 existing lots, and that is incorrect. Here's a list of the studies that we submitted in support of this application. As was mentioned by staff, these were circulated. We did receive comments back, and we're currently in the process of addressing those comments and preparing a resubmission to the city. So just in summary, the proposed development is in keeping with the policies of the city, region, and province. I think that this is a great example of the kind of gentle intensification that makes sense in these built-up areas of the city. It's an opportunity to bring new homes to an area with minimal impact on the existing neighborhood. And the project really was designed to be that continuation of Clinton Drive to match what has been previously approved in the subdivision to the east, with just 2 lots with a sites with some more site-specific exemptions because of the existing lot fabric on Edgar. So that is the conclusion. Thank you so much, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, thanks very much. So I don't think we have anybody signed up beyond Daphne to speak. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on this particular application? Now, don't leave here today regretting that you didn't say anything. I'm just trying to help you out here. Okay, going once, going twice, seeing none. All right, so we'll bring this back to council, and this is Councillor Silowitz's ward, so why don't you lead us off, and you can move that motion to refer all comments back to staff, I think.
I will indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everybody. That wasn't me. Welcome to our council public meeting this evening. Thank you to everyone who is with us here this evening in chambers, and to those who are possibly listening and watching online. I want to thank our staff for all the work that they've done with this particular application of these 9 new lots, and I also want to thank the applicant for the work that they have done in keeping the area very similar to what we have now. This is the extension of Clinton that was always envisioned many years ago, and now we're seeing that come to fruition. So I am very pleased to see this happen, and I would imagine that the residents who are already living on Clinton will also welcome something such as this. I also want to make reference to Mr. Angelus's letter, and I understand his concerns. In a perfect world, no. In a perfect world, I would agree that we should have a better form of the backyards, but your discussion as to them matching the ones that are at the back of them, that's very important. So if Mr. De Angelis is online and he wishes to have any further discussion with myself, I welcome that. Please contact my office. Other than that, Mr. Chair, again, thank you for bringing this forward. I look forward to having Clinton, this Clinton extension completed. And when we come back to the next round of discussions, when it comes back to council, I'm sure that anything that has been raised here this evening or in a communication will have been dealt with appropriately by our staff. So I do move this and have all comments back to staff. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And Councillor Tree, you're next. Would you like to second this?
Yeah, sure. I just have curiosities on the map. It looks like currently for the extension of Clinton, this is the vacancy line on both sides, north side and south side. So my curiosity here, do you have any plans or approved proposal here? If you look at the map here, just on existing Clintons, this is the map, maybe it's not fresh. It's vacant land, very big. So I'm just curious, what exactly on this area?
Like, are you asking what the future plan
If there's
is?
any existing proposal here, or is there any future one? If you bring the map there, so the proposal here, just east side of that proposal is existing Clinton Drive. I see from Google Map there was nothing so far. So I'm just curious. This is really big land put there, have nothing to build up or proposal around here. See from here, there's nothing. Yeah, maybe it's not accurate. I'm just curious.
Through the chair to Councillor Tree. So to the east of this consolidation of land, there is an approved plan of subdivision that is probably not yet built, but it does have a similar zone category as to what is being proposed here. So there's an approved plan of subdivision with the existing, with a portion of the Clinton Drive extension. And then to the west of this parcel, this consolidated parcel, there is no development application proposed.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. I'll move it. Oh, second.
Okay, thanks a lot. Is there anybody else on this particular application? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments. My concern is on page 8. There'll be a loss of 79 trees. So I just want to emphasize that I know that the applicant's agent is taking notes. This is really something that in terms of keeping the tree canopy and also a tree loss is a tree loss, right? So, and I think we do have a formula, right? Every tree is removed and replacement, if not one, but two. So I'm just raising it. It's good to see, as the local council said, this Kinton, the extension is coming to what was conceived it to be, but just be mindful about the restoration to the best you could in terms of those 79 trees removal. And I'm not going to comment other than the inconsistency and other things in terms of frontage and so on that mentioned page 7, because I hear the applicant's agent talk about resubmission. I presume those technical matters would be looked after. But the tree is that either you remove it or don't remove it. So it looks like there's a little wiggle room there. So I just want to offer my comments. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion before us. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 4.3, revised official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for applications at 9861 Yonge Street and 236 and 240 Church Street. And from staff to present the details of this application is Simone Fiore.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Mayor West, Council, and members of the public. The third item tonight involves proposed revised official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications for the lands municipally known as 9861 Yonge Street, 236 and 240 Church Street South. The subject lands are comprised of 3 contiguous parcels that form a through lot, having frontage on both Yonge Street and Church Street South. The lands are immediately south of Major Mackenzie Drive East, north of Harding Boulevard, and are immediately adjacent to the proposed Miles Hills Parkette. The subject lands are currently designated Downtown Local Center and are within the Civic District of the city's official plan. Uses permitted within the Downtown Local Center shall be used for mixed-use, transit-oriented development. For lands having frontage on Yonge Street, permitted uses include residential apartments, office, commercial, retail, and major office. The maximum density of a development block within the Civic District is 2.5 FSI and a maximum building heights of around 8 stories. With respect to zoning, the subject lands are presently zoned residential second density, R2 zone, and residential multiple third density, RM3 zone, under bylaw 6671 as amended. The subject applications were approved in principle by the Ontario Land Tribunal through an interim decision in 2023 to permit a 10-story mixed-use residential commercial building with a density of 4.6 FSI. Notwithstanding this OLT interim decision, the applicant submitted the subject revised official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications to the city in 2024. The revised proposal would facilitate the construction of a 21-story high-density mixed-use residential commercial building. So for more detail, the subject revised official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications are seeking to permit a 21-story mixed-use residential commercial rental apartment building on a 6-story base building to be comprised of 268 dwelling units and 232.05 square meters of at-grade commercial space along the Yonge Street frontage. Of the total dwelling units proposed, 4 units are proposed as integrated 3-story townhouse dwelling units along the Church Street frontage. Vehicular access is to be provided from Church Street South with no access from Yonge Street. And the proposed driveway from Church Street is to connect the proposed drop-off and loading area and ramp to the underground parking levels that are to serve the development. Individual driveways and associated parking spaces are proposed for the 4 Church Street South facing townhomes. The proposed revised official plan amendment seeks to amend the policies of the downtown local center designation to permit an increased building height to 21 stories and increased maximum density to 6.7 FSI. The official plan amendment also seeks an exemption to the angular plane transition to Yonge Street and an increase in tower floor plate for floors 7 and 8. And the applicant's revised zoning bylaw amendment seeks to rezone the subject lands from the R2 zone and the RM3 zone to residential multiple 6 density zone under bylaw 6671 to permit the proposed townhouse dwellings and apartment building with site-specific development standards. So planning staff have circulated the subject applications to internal and external agencies for review and comment. Even though these applications remain under the jurisdiction of the OLT, based on the significant revisions from the OLT approved development proposal, the purpose of this report is to see comments from council and the public with respect to these revised applications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Simone. And for the applicant is David Nelligan from Aird Burles. I presume, oh, there's David, live and in person. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So my name is David Nelligan. I'm a land use planning lawyer at Aird Burles here on behalf of the applicant and owner. And if you may have seen me before, it's because this file has been around for some time. The first application of this file was back in 2012. It was appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board in 2017. And thanks to the hard work of staff and cooperation with council, we were able to bring forward a settlement proposal in 2023 for a 10-story high mixed-use building. What is before you today is significantly different, but I believe that what is changed in this proposal is a result of significant changes to policy and significant changes to the built environment in Richmond Hill already. With respect to policy changes, council has approved OPA 18.6, which is appealed before the Ontario Land Tribunal and therefore not in effect. But I think it gives an indication of council's direction for an understanding that regional mixed-use corridors, as this site would have been, require greater height and greater density. OPA 18.6 would have increased the minimum height or maximum height on the site from 8 stories to 15 stories. So already we've seen a movement in height and density through those policies. Importantly, the site is now part of a PMTSA, a protected major transit station area, which, as you know, the province has identified these PMTSAs as areas of the province where the greatest heights and intensities are to be directed. This policy is also responsive, or this proposal is also responsive to the existing housing shortage and the need for additional housing and intensification in Ontario cities. This proposal is for a rental development that proposes 125 affordable housing units. That's 47% of the units being proposed through this development are proposed to be affordable housing rental units. The proposal is also responsive to significant changes in recent approvals by this council and by the OLT. You just need to look one property south of the proposal to see approvals for 22 stories on the Metro Review site south of the proposed parquet. Further north, we have recent approvals of 20 stories. So while 21 stories sounds like a significant increase in what has previously been permitted and what the OLT accepted as a settlement. It actually fits into the future fabric of this stretch of Yonge Street quite well. I submitted a letter to the members of council earlier today that shows a graphic that shows the height transitioning from the highest heights in the south of the Civic District, the Metroview project, to the shorter heights in the north. And this project at 21 stories fits perfectly within that transition line. I have read the submissions of some of the neighbors who are concerned about traffic, increases in traffic, because the site is accessed through Church Street. If it's any consolation, this proposal actually proposes fewer parking spaces than the OLT approved 10-story unit. And that's because this project is designed to be responsive to the PMTSA and transit-oriented development. So traffic through this proposal would actually be reduced if it's approved. We are before the jurisdiction of the OLT at this time. What we are proposing and what we are hoping and what I remain confident is that my client and the city of Richmond Hill can return back to council on consent, hand in hand, and seek to revise our settlement proposal and ultimately get approval from the OLT. The alternative is to return to the OLT where we currently sit for a contested hearing, and I don't believe there's an appetite for a contested hearing from anybody in this room. I just want to close in my last 15 seconds by thanking staff who have been very cooperative and gracious in reviewing this revised application. I admit it's a significantly changed application. It's very different from what everybody agreed to previously, but I think it's very responsive to the current situation in Richmond Hill, and I hope that council supports it.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we've said a number of times that this meeting tonight is not about making decisions, it's about gathering input. But just to be clear on that, not from your perspective, I know you know that, but for anybody watching, we are really, this is an opportunity for hearing input from the community and from council. So thank you very much. Okay, so we'll bring this back to, oh, sorry, is there any members of the public? Sorry, Mr. Green, you are, I almost forgot you were waiting so patiently there. Thank you very much for being here.
Do I put the diagram on here if I want to project it onto the screen or here?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Actually, I take exception with most of what you said because I'm a resident in the area. But anyway, I hope to make that clear in my presentation. I'd first of all like to thank Simone Fiore, and she's a real professional. She was absolutely outstanding. So thank you, Simone, for all your. Now, the developer is requesting a revised FSI, floor space index, of 6.71. The existing zoning allows an FSI of 4.6 and a 10-story tower. To visualize FSI, I have two photographs of condominiums along Yonge Street. The first is the Young Harding condominium. That's this one right here. This is one of the densest developments in Richmond Hill, and has an FSI of 2.5. The second is the Grand Palace. Oh, okay. Actually, this is the Young Harding condominium, and the next one is the Grand Palace condominium. And it's just south of the Young Harding condominium. Both of these developments have an FSI of 2.5, and as previously stated, are among the densest developments in Richmond Hill. The revised submission from the developer, 9861 Yonge Street, has a proposed FSI of 6.71. This is more than 2.5 times these two dense developments. And these are very high density developments. The lot that the developer proposes to build on is only 0.71 acres, That's not even 3/4 of an acre. He wants to put a 21-story tower on a less than 3/4 acre lot? To cram 21 stories on such a small lot is excessive and totally without merit, completely ignoring the effect on the neighborhood. The existing zoning of 10 stories with an FSI 4.6 would still be one of the densest, if not the densest, development in Richmond Hill. And it's almost twice the density shown in these two photographs. Now, I'd like to comment on Councillor Chan's comment about the trees. There are at least 20 very mature trees on this lot that, if this development were to go through, would be cut down. So I just wanted to mention these are very mature trees, and I really appreciate Mr. Chan, Councillor Chan, for bringing the environmental aspect into the presentation. I would also like to point out that the development would not have Yonge Street access, as was previously mentioned, which means that all the traffic from the development would funnel onto Church Street. Now, I know that the lawyer mentioned that there'll be fewer parking spaces. Because there'll be fewer parking spaces doesn't mean there'll be fewer cars. It seems to be a little bit lack of logic there, but anyway. In conclusion, I would urge council to defend its official plan and the existing zoning of the Ontario Land Tribunal, even if it means in an adversarial manner where it's one side against the other. I think the original proposal should be defended. And I just want to make my point that 21 stories is just totally unacceptable for this lot. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And thank you again, Simon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. We certainly appreciate you being here. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to this application? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring this back to council, and this is in Councillor Silowitz's ward. So Councillor Silowitz, over to you to move the motion to refer all comments back to staff.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Green, for delegating this evening. It's appreciated. And I also want to thank the two residents who sent in email communications as well. I want to thank our planning staff for all the time they have dedicated to me and with me in discussions on this particular reapplication. Your input and your insight to myself has been superb, and I want to thank you for that. On the other hand, I also want to thank the applicant, because the applicant has spent an equal amount of time with myself having these discussions. So for that, I am very grateful. I really do appreciate that when a developer comes forward to have these kinds of collaborative discussions. The problem we have before us is that this is a resubmission to an original application that was only for 10 stories. And we now have an application before us for 21 stories. I just want to remind everyone that this matter is before the Ontario Land Tribunal, and it is under their jurisdiction, and it is therefore their decision as to what the ultimate decision will come for this application. Would I prefer the original 10 stories? Of course I would. There's no question I would. But that was submitted to us prior to the changes that have been made by the province to our land planning use policies. And as a result, as the lawyer for the applicant stated, there is a greater request before us. And this request is in keeping, no matter how small the lot is, this request is in keeping with what is proposed for our new provincial laws, specifically Bill 23 and Bill 109. And I've had many discussions with both our staff and the applicant, and they know that I would prefer it to be less than 21 stories. I understand how it would look from the young frontage and the buildings that you referenced, Mr. Green, were approved many, many years ago when that square footage and that height was what was to be acceptable. If I remember correctly, the building at Young and Harding, I live in that building, so I know it very well. That building, when that came forward to council, that was the densest building that was proposed to the then town of Richmond Hill. So when you look at the back of that building, you see the structure of the building that cascades down towards the neighborhood. And I want to thank the applicant for listening to me when I've had those discussions with you about having that as well. It's very, very important that we cascade down into the neighborhood. And I also am very grateful that we continue the townhouse construction along Church Street South, which is very, very important. Do I have concerns about increased traffic on Church Street South? Of course I do. We all do. However, Church Street South, as we've discussed many times in this forum, is designed to be what is called a ring road. And the ring roads that are present, that are close to Yonge Street along the high intensification corridor, are meant to take traffic off ultimately from Yonge Street. Is the traffic going to increase on Church Street South? Yes, it is. We can't get away from that. There's too much construction there, and more construction that will come when Elmwood is developed as well. Across the road, we have a very large lot that has been vacant for a very long time, but it's also approved by the then OMB for 21 stories. So when this goes back to the Ontario Land Tribunal and they look at what is around this site, whether or not they approve what's in front of us, 21 stories, that's up to them. We have no jurisdiction here, but we can give our comments. So if I may just continue, so I don't have to go to a second round. Would I prefer this to be of lower height? Absolutely. Do I understand why the height is proposed and the density is proposed? Yes, I do. Just when I refer to, Mr. Green, when you refer to Yonge Street, that there's no egress or ingress from Yonge Street, that's because of the region. The region does not permit anything to open egress or ingress into and out of Yonge Street. That's why for the building to the south of it, the Metroview building, the access is on Harding, and this one, the access is on Church Street South. And unfortunately, that's what's in place as policy. So again, I understand the concern of the residents. I feel it myself. I'm a resident, and but I also effectively understand what is before us, what has been proposed, what is in keeping with the current bills, the land use planning bills from the province. And if anyone has an argument, it's with the province, it's not with us. So I look forward to how we move this forward. This has to go back to the Ontario Land Tribunal. I know that our staff have taken into consideration all of our comments, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens then. It's very difficult for a councillor to have to say that this is not within our control, but it is not. And this is the Yonge Street corridor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the extra time.
No problem. Okay, so Councillor Davidson, you're next. Would you like to second this? Yes. Return all comment back to staff.
Thank you to staff, and thank you to everyone who made presentations. I'll make my comments, but then I have a question. I agree with the resident that limiting spaces isn't going to stop the number of cars. It's just going to mean street parking. And now we're talking about all these extra cars on Church. Well, where are the cars going to go? And I'm telling you, this is absolutely the case because we're already in my neighborhood seeing even townhouses that are turned into, that are, have one parking spot, but everybody has two cars and they're upset. Where am I going to put the second car? To this idea that a transit corridor will serve everyone. Not everyone works north and south. And it's not like it's 24/7. So, and the GO trains we know are extremely sparse. So I know that it's been designated a transit corridor, but the truth is people will have to have a car. I can't imagine someone walking to No Frills to go shopping, you know, so I know that it's zoned as that, but in reality, people are going to have cars and the city's going to be left to figure out where to put all the ones that don't, all the units that don't have parking spots. I found the drawings a little confusing. Is there, through you, Mr. Chair, I am asking staff, is there any green space or recreational area on the property for residents of this development to enjoy? It looked all building to me.
Right next door.
Yeah, I saw there's a park, but I wasn't clear if that was a city park or if that's a park they're putting in.
Through the chair to Councillor Davidson, the municipal park is to the south of this proposed development. There is limited outdoor amenity area on site.
So through you, Mr. Chair. So the green space is city property. What? So are there any green spaces on this development property for residents themselves?
Through the chair to Councillor Davidson, there's limited outdoor amenity area. There may be a rooftop amenity area, but no at-grade amenity area. Very limited.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So my own personal feeling on that is you're going to offer housing and I appreciate the affordable units. I really do. But it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of left to the city to provide everything else. That doesn't make sense to me. The property to me should have some form of recreational area for the people that live there. But my biggest question through you, Mr. Mayor, is why are we talking about this if it's completely out of our hands? If it's already gone to the OLT, explain to the OLT to me. It feels like false hope to have public hearings and tell residents they can come and give their opinion and we can give our opinion, but we have absolutely no options here to say this is too much for the space.
So through the chair to Councillor Davidson, the ultimate jurisdiction is with the Ontario Land Tribunal. The revised proposal in front of us needs to provide comment, and what will determine whether we go to the OLT in hand with the applicant or opposed. So we are trying to ascertain from council and through the comments tonight whether this revised proposal is something that staff can recommend in a similar way for a further settlement, a revised settlement to the previous decision. After staff has done an evaluation and hearing the comments tonight, we will be able to determine whether we are in support of the proposed development, which will then, that resolution will be returned to the OLT. So if we are in support of the application, that would go forward as another settlement on this revised proposal. If staff feel that we cannot support this revised development and council agrees with those recommendations, we would not be going back to the OLT as a settlement. We would be going to a hearing.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. So the 10 stories was decided a year ago, and now we're back for 21. And then maybe it'll be 31. Like it feels like, it does feel like this process is laborious, and I find it quite frustrating that the city really has to either be an adversary or completely capitulate, one or the other. Anyway, I haven't been in this position before, so thank you for the education, and thank you again to the people that came. Thank you.
Okay, if I may, so just something you had just said, Ms. Janetta. So to be clear, tonight is all about getting comments. It's not about making decisions. So ultimately, the comments that we get back tonight would still go back to staff. Staff will do the further analysis and come back to council or committee of the whole with a recommendation as to whether we should settle or not settle, or there's some space in between. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, this is a very unusual situation. I'll comment on that when it's my turn too. Councillor Thompson and then Regional Local Councillor DePaulo.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody that's worked on this. I do have to say I find it very confusing. So as Councillor Davidson talked about, when it's under the jurisdiction of the OLT, I'm trying to sort out exactly what our role is. So, and maybe I have to go through a bit of history here first. So the original application ended up at the OLT, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'm going to, so if it was that staff didn't recommend that we approve the original application, and we endorsed staff's recommendation, it ended up going to the OLT. I'm assuming a hearing was heard and that staff would have taken the position of, so I guess they would have discussed all those things that, that why it was refused to council. But it seems that after the OLT gave its decision, it's the applicant that has now appealed what the OLT has decided. That's not correct. So could I just get clarification there? That would be appreciated.
So the applicant has an approval in principle by the OLT for a 10-story building with 4.6 FSI. And it was returned back to the city to finalize the instruments to give that approval in principle effect. The applicant has revised the proposal and put another one in front of staff to consider in lieu of finalizing their existing approval in principle. So because it departs so significantly for what was previously settled and approved at the OLT, we've brought it to council for A, for comments from the public, and B, to see if council has any comment on this further revised proposal. The approval of this further revised proposal will ultimately be in the hands of the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they are always interested on council's position on a revised proposal.
Okay, so I'm hearing two things here. So at one point, the OLT approved a decision or made a decision, and it was approved, but you're saying it was approved in principle.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Thompson, it's been approved and it was returned to the city to prepare the implementing documents, the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw. And quite often that is done in conjunction with the site plan application, which the applicant has with the city. The applicant said, hold on, we would like to revisit this proposal. Let's stop. And we have which is the proposal that we have in front of us tonight.
Okay, wow. Okay, so this sounds like it could be a never-ending to me, because what would stop them again from doing the exact same thing? This could go on and on and on. I don't know why we didn't stop, at that point and said, no, you work with what was decided by the OLT, or you're starting from scratch, and we're going to go right back. If you want to throw away what the decision was, then throw that away. Fine. You're going to start from scratch. And if you have to wait for another new hearing instead of now keeping the OLT at the ready, something doesn't sit right with me on this at all. I don't like this at all. So I guess now what I'd like to know is that if we do send this back to the OLT, and I know there's two possibilities here. One will be staff will have recommended that we don't accept the revisions and we'll send it back to the OLT. The other option is staff will recommend that we accept the revisions, but if council, and if you get somebody like me that's upset with the way this has been conducted and says, no, let's make them go through the hard way. Now you're gonna have to, now, I guess my question would be, if that wasn't your recommendation, what role will the solicitor play when they go to the OLT?
Through the chair, so council directs staff on what position to take at the OLT. So if council says to if staff support the recommendation and council says, no, we're not supporting it, we would have a contested hearing and council would direct our council to go and support council's position, which would be, in this case, that you wouldn't want the position, you would want to defend the current position, which is the 10-story. So so council would make that direction, not irrespective, and we would have to get an outside planner. If staff were supporting the 21 stories, council would have to get an outside planner to support that position.
Exactly. So again, it's just becomes a real money situation here. So yeah, because if we go against what the staff said, then it just becomes another burden on the taxpayer. I do not like this at all. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, Regional Local Councillor DePaulo and then Councillor Tree.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really find this too terribly different from what we normally face with applications for high rise, and particularly on the Young Corridor. It's often the case that the applicant that we're beyond the time limit, and the applicant has exercised their right to go to the OLT, and then often, and I think in fact this term, the few high-rise developments that have been approved have been done by council directing our staff to mediate a settlement and do that through the OLT. I think that's what's been happening. I have to congratulate our staff for doing a great job with that. Now, I think what's going to happen in this case is our staff's going to come forward with a recommendation based on the cost to the community of fighting against a revised application that is revised because of changes in provincial policy. And our staff, I can count on them to give the best professional opinion as to whether or not this conforms to new provincial policy, and whether or not the likelihood is high that the OLT will grant it. And then the council has to make the decision. It's still council's decision regardless. We're going to direct our staff either to support an amendment, and there may be some negotiations between now and that day, and it might not look exactly like what's been applied for today, or this council, if it feels strongly that we should oppose the application, we go forward like we would with any other, and hire someone to fight on our behalf and to forward council's position at that OLT hearing. So it's a little different, but not too inconsistent with what we've done certainly this term of council and recently, as the policy framework really changes dramatically. The original application was made in 2012, and at that time we wouldn't have contemplated the heights and densities that we're looking at. You see across from Hillcrest Mall, a 15 or 16 story was the max in 2012. As was mentioned, Harding was the most dense building. I think it's 16 stories. But things have really changed, and it's changed. Our official plan update shows 40 stories at Yonge and 16th, and gradually moving toward 20 as you get towards Major Mac is I think what the province is mandating for us on the Young Corridor. But I don't share the same concerns about the fact that you would have to have a car. I think certainly this would be the type of building where someone could live without a vehicle at all. I was talking to someone earlier today, a land surveyor that lives at Yonge and Davisville and doesn't have a car at all, uses transit for everything, and actually works in Richmond Hill. So he commutes up here. Our current system is good enough that he's able to do that, but our system will really be adapted and improved as we get closer to the Yonge subway being placed at Yonge and Highway 7. We're forced to allow for densities that contemplate a subway being in place at Yonge and 7 and ultimately probably going to 16th and then to Major Mackenzie above ground. And the east-west corridor on Major Mackenzie is going to really unite Vaughan and Richmond Hill and Markham. And so this would be a location where you should be able to get conveniently around your region. And YRT is committed to ramping up their buses until that subway is completed to match any level of service required. And we're getting that commitment from YRT. So it'd be a long time before this building sees any occupants. And I think at that time the bus service will be much better. But we have to look ultimately at what's planned. And Yonge and Major Mac will be the intersection of pretty convenient public transit, and this is the place where you wouldn't need a car or any ground amenities because you can walk across to our new civic square. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, so Councillor Tree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, to our planning team. So my first question regarding to the village core OPA 18.6. Is this area including our OPA? I remember the OPA 18.6 starting from north of the Metro Mac, but this is not area, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Tree, this area is going to be redesignated from the former downtown local center to a regional mixed-use corridor.
So it's not the KDA or 18.6, right? So I wanted to confirm with that.
So it's part of 18.6, but it's not a KDA.
Okay. So my second question regarding to the parking. So if I remember, I heard some news maybe last year. So Ontario province passed a law for the corridor areas. There's no regulation for parking. Is that true or not? Refresh my memory.
Through the chair to Councillor Tree, within PMTSAs, there are no parking requirements.
So for in this case, it's under the PSSA, right?
That is correct. So there are no minimum parking requirements that can be imposed.
Yeah, now the reason bring here is even Ontario mentioned that, but from my conversation with different builders and different planners, if you look at the parking proposal in this plan, so we totally have around 268 units, but the parking is only 125. I have worked with the mayor and also deputy mayor regarding the public parking, because in my ward, for residents living in a very small townhouse, each one has a parking, but even though they have an additional car, I was looking so hard and work with staff to find a public parking for them. And this one is even along Yonge Street. For current traffic conditions, I'm not sure, not very confident to ask a majority of 50% of the residents, just no cars taking the public transit. I don't know when the extension of the subway from Highway 7 area can be extended to Major Mac. That might be 50 years later on. So just regarding to the parking, I feel very uncomfortable to have this plan in front of us. And also consider Councillor Thompson's and also Davidson's mentioned, this plan is not the first original one, back and forth more than 15 years. So this is really not standard or normal process. We've seen a similar case in front of us before. For this new proposal, I feel uncomfortable to support it as well. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'll just make a few comments. Just a couple questions first. Does this meet the angular plane? There was a comment there that it does not, right?
So the angular plane in this instance actually is measured from two ways. So from the rear to the neighborhood to the east, as well as along the Yonge Street corridor. The Yonge Street corridor angular plane, it does not meet. And that angular plane is also a different objective. In this stretch of Yonge Street, it's to protect the spires, the view of the spires further north on Yonge Street. So there's the angular plane across the Yonge Street and across from Church Street that is measured. It meets the one to the neighborhood designation to the east, but it does not meet the one across Yonge Street.
Okay. Angular plane is a real fallback position. It's the step you take before you fall over the cliff. You need to fix that because it's not like there's all kinds of other places that we may be able to work with, but that's not one of them. So I think that needs to be fixed. And from what I'm seeing in the diagram, I don't think that really should be that difficult. So this, given what Councillor Tree said, really at the end of the day, the land use designation that we realistically have on that is 18.6. I mean, I know that by law we're comparing this against the downtown local center, but the fact of the matter is 18.6 is the new reality. It was passed by council. I mean, it has been appealed for whatever reason, but at the end of the day, that is the current that matches provincial policy, whether we like it or not. So how does this compare to the to 18.6? Like just generally speaking.
So the 18.6 allows for 15 stories and an FSI of 2.5, whereas previously the previous regime allowed for 8 stories, and I believe it was, what was the a lower FSI.
Okay.
So that's kind of, we have assessed it against the upcoming policy regime, and it still exceeds that.
Okay.
Exceeds those parameters. I'll note that, you know, in evaluating the appropriateness of that additional height and density, we turn to the other policies of the OP to determine the appropriateness of that additional height and density.
Right, because the reality is almost every building around there now or in the near future is going to be approximately 20-ish stories. So there's a balancing act that's going to be needed there. But I think we need to get off this and analyzing it from the old policy regime because that's just not relevant anymore. 18.6 will at some point in time be approved because that's the provincial policy statement. The affordable units, I'm interested in this. We are in a housing crisis. Can staff comment on what is the percentage or how many units are we looking at that meet the definition of affordable in our various policies?
Through the chair, so through to council, to Mayor West. So the applicant is correct. They are proposing approximately 47% of the total unit count, which is about 125 affordable units. We typically ask the applicant to fill out a housing affordability sheet, and based on that, those are the numbers that they have proposed. So it meets our policies for affordable with the percentage as indicated.
Okay, that's important. It's really important because we're working hard, and 47% of a building being affordable is pretty high. Am I not? I'm correct in that, right?
Yes. Through the policies typically require a minimum of 25% to 35%, depending if you're in a KDA. They well exceed that.
Right, and that's great. The traffic study, because clearly this is an issue. I mean, the fact that it only has one outlet onto Church Street, I get what the residents are saying. Has the traffic study that been requested done, and have we reviewed it?
So as Yonge Street is under the jurisdiction of the Region of York, they have to comment. They have not commented on the traffic study at this point. As you know, the region does look to consolidate access points along Yonge Street or eliminate them where feasible. So the appropriateness of having no access has not yet been commented on by the region.
Okay, but that's going to happen through this process. And then
Correct.
once they do their analysis, we will then do our analysis to check the veracity and the accuracy of the traffic study, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and that, we won't get a report back from council or from staff until all of those details have been worked out. I mean, we're at a, ironically, but we're at a early stage in this reapplication.
That is correct. Once we have all comments that have been satisfied and or we feel that staff are in a position to bring forward recommendations to council, we will do that and answering all of the questions and comments that have been received here tonight as part of that evaluation.
Okay, so there's work to be done. The reality, though, that we're facing here is that, okay, well, actually, let me start off by saying this first. This situation with going to the OLT all that time ago and creating this confusion and kerfuffle right now is really frustrating, right? And I get some of the reasons why that situation happened, but it really does kind of bug me a bit, actually a lot, to know that we spent all this time and energy on an OLT hearing with the staff's input and so on and so forth, and now we're doing it all over again. And I'm getting a little tired of this because we do have situations where, you know, the thing hasn't been built for good, bad, or otherwise reason, and then we're just wasting staff's time doing a fulsome analysis all over again. So this is part of the confusion right now, and I can feel it on council. But the reality of this situation, the way I'm understanding it, is that in some ways, like, we don't have to say yes to this proposal at the OLT. If we say no to it, it'll just go back to the OLT and we'll be doing it all over again. The question that you always have to ask, and we know this on council, is that if we're going back to the OLT, are we going back for a reason that we're likely going to win? And I would cast your mind back to earlier this term when we told the residents in a particular area not to appeal what we had approved. And it was hard to approve it, but we approved it. It was a 28-story building. The residents appealed it and they got slaughtered. In fact, it's a 28-story building now, not a 25-story building, which is what we approved. Now, they don't let the public appeal things to the OLT anymore, and I'm not sure that's a great idea, but I'm just saying we have to be careful as council to decide when the time comes whether this is something that we take to the OLT or not. Having said that, there are a number of comments that we've heard tonight from council and from the public that I think are valid, and they need to be analyzed and they need to be looked at. But one of the things I will say about this application, 21 stories in that area is likely going to be, give or take, roughly what's going to happen. It's not likely going to be a 10-story building, right? Just from a built form perspective. Now, the FSI might be a little bit high, but I think at the end of the day, it's all a matter of balancing, and nothing is black and nothing is white. So we're going to have to go through that process. But I think if we're at a situation where the staff works really hard, does whatever negotiations you need to do, I think there are some changes that need to likely be made and negotiated by staff. And you can come back to us with something that is, going to be acceptable from a planning point of view and a provincial policy point of view. And it will be an agreement at the OLT as opposed to a contested hearing that we're going to lose. That but that remains to be seen, and that's the work that's before us. So I'm a little over time. I'm sorry. Councillor Silovitz, you want a second round?
I do. Thank you. I just want to make some comments after, thank you, Mr. Chair, after everything that I've heard here. So the most important thing I would like to say here to my council colleagues, as well as to our residents and members of the public, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is coming back to council with staff recommendations. And I have great faith in our staff. Our staff know what they're doing. As you said wisely yourself, Mr. Green, they certainly are professionals. So
Come back.
I have great faith. Really, that's not me. I have great faith that when we get the next report coming back to council, committee of the whole and council, where we are going to be faced with a challenge, do we agree with staff recommendations or do we not, whatever they may be, because we don't know what they're going to be. We have no idea yet. We will know when we get that staff report in front of us. And I will make sure, and I will make sure,
What is that?
sounds like someone's mic is open. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. I will make sure that the residents who placed their objections here this evening are definitely informed, and this will come back to Committee of Whole and Council. None of the residents contacted me personally. So should you wish to continue a discussion with myself, I will gladly do that and sit down with you and further explain exactly what is before us, which is a very difficult situation. And I do believe that our staff there's no question in my mind that our staff are handling this superbly. Because this is not something that we see every day. And it's not something that we deal with all the time at council public meetings. It's very, very different. But again, I also urge everybody to remember that the reason this is before us this evening is because we have different provincial policies in front of us from when the original was approved at the OMB. So this is a purpose-built rental. For that, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for the 47% proposed affordable housing. And I hope that came a lot from my discussions with the applicant, that we managed to get that amount. I think it's quite spectacular. Parking, again, as Councillor Tree was stating, there is no parking standard anymore. So I do believe, I think what we have to do is, and I've said this many, many times before, we have to project ourselves forward. That when these buildings are all built, when that corridor is all built, probably none of us will still be here, then there will be a different mindset to using public transit. The problem is, as I always say, and I've said to my colleagues, we live in Canada. We don't live somewhere on the equator. And for people to walk in the cold and the winter is very, very difficult. So cars, as Councillor Davidson said, are still a factor. So that's all I have to say. I just wanted to make a few more points here. I thought that was important. Again, if the residents wish to speak with me about this, I will gladly have that discussion. I look forward to continued discussions with the applicant. They have been very collaborative up to this point. While we may not agree with the ultimate height that you want, you have been very collaborative in discussions with myself and of course, with our staff. So I agree with what Mayor West said, that the Yonge Street 45-degree angular plane definitely needs to be looked at. There's no question about that. Church Street South, that's a different story. It meets that angular plane. So unfortunately, we can't go to the region and ask them to give us an exit or entrance on Yonge. It's just not going to happen. So we have this exit and entrance, which is on Church Street. And hopefully, as we move through all these processes and all these development applications, traffic studies that are made and designed for this particular area will take into consideration everything that is being considered before us. So thank you again. I appreciate everybody stepping forward, and I appreciate everybody's discussion, especially to my council colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tree.
Yeah, I just want to correct myself. I just look at this report again. So residential parking is only have 75, and also unit is 265, like 1 out of 4, 25% parking only. So I'm just new elected for 2 years. I never see any plan regarding to this parking as this low rating for residents. We don't expect in the next few years, if this fund be passed and they build up the building later on, residents looking for parking. So I may know city is looking for a proposal to review and research for the parking, but we don't know how long that's going to be. So I don't want to become a disaster for 200 units of the owners looking for parking. That's going to be a big headache for all cities. Thank you. I want to suggest maybe planning team, if possible, try to negotiate a little bit more parking from the applicants. If this is going to be a promote a little bit more, just in case. Even there is no parking required from Ontario province, but from practice perspective, your experience perspective, look at 20, 30 years ago, and also the traffic and parking requirements, what's the best practice? So let's negotiate a new parking just in case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we know for a fact that this is going to be rental, purpose-built rental?
The applicant has indicated that they plan to do purpose-built rental.
Okay. When does that get locked in, or can it be locked in?
So this discussion has been in front of council before. There is no mechanism by which to lock in the tenure for rental unless the development seeks some sort of coordination with a program like the DC deferral program that actually has an agreement that is registered on title that secures the tenure.
What I guess that's the part I'd be interested in knowing, that if and when the final report comes back to council, I'd like to know if there's any indication that it guarantees that it will be rental, because we've seen that happen before where it was supposed to be rental and then it wasn't. So, okay. All right. So we have a motion before us then for this. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is so I would suggest talk to Councillor Silovitz and we'll make sure that happens. And there are mechanisms to because of, I'm not sure what's the requirement, or what is our expectation, given that this is a bit of an unusual situation, that people are informed that have come and spoken about this in the past?
So because this is a non-statutory public meeting for the purposes of reviewing the revised proposal, if the neighbors want to reach out to Simone and provide her their information, so yourself or anyone else want to provide their information to be kept in the loop, if you will. If they contact Simone, we will do a courtesy notice at a future date when the application is coming forward.
And Mr. Green, because you're the only person here, you're responsible for getting it out to the neighborhood. All right, good job. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next item then is request for comments, a municipally initiated official plan amendment on employment land protection. And the planner on this that will describe this for us is Andrew Crawford. And go ahead, Andrew.
All right. Oh, all right. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and any members of public who are either leaving or will be watching online.
It's nothing to do with you, though.
Yes, I quite understand that. Policy is always the interesting subject that everyone stays for, right? So I'm here today to talk to you about the transitional official plan amendment respecting the employment land protections. There we go. So just to give you a little bit of context on what employment lands are in Richmond Hill. So if you look at the map on the screen, all the lands that are colored in purple on that map are our designated employment lands. They're generally located alongside the Highway 404 and Leslie Street corridors, and there's also some employment lands along the CN Rail corridor north of Major Mackenzie. So Richmond Hill has been developing its employment lands over the past number of decades. They've typically been built out in a style of business parks, which has a wide range of employment generating uses. They consist of, a number of office buildings, including a number of head offices, important ones. We have a number of manufacturing businesses in there as well, warehouses, hotels, convention centers, as well as a number of supporting commercial uses, such as, restaurant campuses, some recreational uses, as well as a number of other retail uses that support the businesses in the area. So employment lands are really important to have designated because they allow a place for businesses to be located that can't really locate anywhere else in the city. These may be for reasons such as different types of emissions, such as sound, odor, or they may have high amounts of truck traffic, all that sort of stuff that don't really lend themselves to being next to a daycare or a residential house or something like that. And as you noted earlier, Mr. Mayor, the city has a very limited supply of employment lands left. We're a pretty built out municipality without expanding into the Oak Ridges Moraine area. We're kind of at the limit of what we have. So if we lose any more employment lands, they certainly cannot be replaced through any greenfield development. So there were a number of changes to provincial policy that have been made recently. The most impactful really is the new provincial planning statement, as well as a number of revisions that were made to the Planning Act that took effect last October. Policy planning staff are currently in the process of preparing a comprehensive amendment that will be looking at all of these changes and bringing that forward sometime in the future. But really tonight, the one specific amendment that we want to focus on is the change in definition of area of employment. The province has really shrunk this down and narrowed this definition to really only permit the types of uses such as manufacturing, industrial, warehousing, and goods movement. Those are the only uses that are now permitted. The uses of office, retail, and commercial uses that are standalone, not associated with another permitted use, are explicitly excluded from that definition. So that kind of creates a couple of issues for Richmond Hill because, as I said, we have a very mixed employment area with a lot of different uses on a lot of different parcels. And that certainly runs the risk that combined with some other policies in the new PPS, that these lands that have these non-permitted uses are no longer subject to the employment land protections that we normally have, and that they may come up for conversion requests and we don't have the same level of protections we do over those. There is another policy in the PPS and the Planning Act that does allow for clusters of existing businesses to kind of be grandfathered in a sense, or at least have provisions to allow those businesses to continue unaffected. But we have to have an enabling policy in place, which is the purpose of the OPA that we have tonight. So the OPA would be adding two policies, or what really the same policy in two sections. That's up in green on the screen. This policy would be added to the employment area designation as well as the employment corridor designation, which are our two employment lands designations. And then this policy would basically just allow existing businesses, existing uses to continue, that they can continue to operate. They would be continued to have the protections that are afforded them under the employment designation. And we wouldn't run any risk of kind of those hole in the donut type situations coming up, and that they would be protected from encroachment from residential uses. So we do have a date of October 20th, which is the date that the PPS took effect. And we kind of have to have that in there just because any uses that would be starting after that date would be, starting under the new PPS. They would obviously not be afforded the same level of protections, but anything that is pre-existing before that date would be covered. So just to recap, so that really the purpose of tonight's council meeting or council public meeting is really to request comments from, I don't think there's anybody left in the public, but certainly from council on the proposed official plan amendments specific to protection and continuation of those existing uses and protection and maintenance of the employment designation. And our recommendation is that the staff report be received for information purposes and that all comments be referred back to staff. Thanks very much. And I'll be happy to answer any comments you may have.
Thank you very much. Regional Local Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. The report is easy to read. There's only 2.5 pages. I can handle that. And when would be the timing for bringing in the transitional policy? Because the indicated time is of essence, particularly at the last sentence of page 2 and page 3. You didn't mention the report. Are we looking at Q2 this year, or it's not clear. There's no date mentioned, although it did say it has to be before the adoption of the new OP. So, through Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we, obviously, when we were preparing the staff report, we can't commit to a specific date because we would need to receive comments back from this meeting. But certainly we would be looking to carry it forward as soon as possible. So that would be within the next, month or 2 months timeframe, whenever we can get a council cycle in place.
Thank you. So my guess was I just said Q2 is kind of right on. Okay, got it. Thank you. The second, because the first question because they have ramification. For example, on the first case we talk about, the 93 Edward. I know it's not here, but had we had the transitional policy in place, that would be no. So we're not here to approve anything at this point in time, just comments. But depending on when the transitional policy might come in for council approval, it might impact potentially on the first application when it comes to decision time. So I'm just wrap my head around it. Timing is really of essence, but it's also have significant ramification, particularly for certain applications that we know. So I don't know what's the proposed approach to this, through Mr. Chair.
Through Director Flores.
Through the chair, with that particular application, certainly the original property site where the school sits is locked down, or will be, because it existed legally before October 20th. We are still, staff are still reviewing. I mean, I can't speak for my development planning colleagues, but in general, staff are still reviewing the Edward Street proposal, because it does need, the Planning Act is specific that it has to have been legally compliant as well. So we will be speaking with the applicant to also look at other tools to see if that can be recognized or not. But again, that's still under review.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but just a comment. That's why I'm raising that as a comment. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to move for the chance.
Okay, thank you. Seconder? Go ahead, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through the chair, want to try and understand the lockdown part of this, and that is, so where we've had, say, something operating prior to the new more rigid policy. So if we go back to the one that we talked about earlier tonight, where institution would be excluded under this policy. I guess my question is, at some future date, the school decides to move on from that location or something like that, does I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this, but I guess when they go to sell, if they were to sell that property, does all the amendments and everything else that was for that property for the use as an institution, stuff like that, remain with it? And then if somebody wanted to do it differently as an employment land, are they now going to be subject to having to go through a whole application process to actually make it employment land again? So it's, I'm just trying to, wrap my head around this.
Through the chair, obviously this is all hypothetically speaking, but with the transition policy, we are able to recognize existing uses so that those uses can continue, but they are considered legal non-conforming uses. So once those uses cease to exist, move on, then it reverts back to the original designation, which would be employment land. If the designation is changed, which I understand was the proposal in that previous application, then it is no longer considered employment land and does not have the protections afforded to employment land designations. So that would be lost. So that's the conundrum that was being contemplated for that previous application. As I said, those are still under review. Perhaps there are some tools in place that can recognize, again, I don't want to speak for my development planning colleagues, but we are going to be exploring what could be done to recognize the existing uses. But again, there are implications with changing the designation.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, that can. Any rate, I appreciate the response. I think I'm going to have to talk with staff a little bit more before the application comes up, because that does give us some cause to pause. So thank you so much.
Okay, Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you. I did get a chance to talk to staff previously. I just want to confirm, so this means that I'm thinking of an area that was employment, and then let's say hypothetically, a long-term care home is a business, so it sets up an employment lands, but then it's also a residence. And then all of a sudden it's easier for the next parcel of land and the next to say, well, we can't make industrial noise because we have people living here. How do we protect our employment lands from that kind of encroachment? Because there are businesses that are residential. And I think we really need to hang on to the employment lands that we have. Does this make it easier for us to stick to specific types of business that won't erode those lands, as I just hypothetically, give you a scenario?
Absolutely correct, Councillor Davidson. That is a concern that staff have as well, with the concern to the creep of, allowing one conversion, and then the next property goes, and then the next property goes, and then the next property goes. So that's kind of part of the reason why we're looking at this amendment, is to make sure that we, lock down the employment lands as quickly as possible. In terms of your example of like a long-term care home, a retirement residence, a nursing home, those would all be considered, generally speaking, as institutional uses, which are not permitted in our employment designations. We would not be looking to include those lands within. And as well, new policies in the new PPS specifically look at kind of outwards facing transition. So it would be incumbent on properties surrounding employment land designated properties to consider how their application, their use may impact the ability for businesses to locate within employment areas. So that would also be a consideration if there were any new applications for new institutional or, nursing home type of uses to locate next to our existing industrial areas.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. When you say to locate, you mean next to, as in areas that aren't employment but are close by. Is that what you mean?
Yep, correct. Across the road, or I think it's specifically within 300 meters is the requirement under the PPS.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'm fine with this. I mean, I think it's necessary to be doing this, and given the changes in provincial policy, I think it's a good response by staff. So with that being said, if there's no other comments, we have a motion before us. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Davidson, Councillor Silovitz, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We will see everybody